Hello and welcome to Model Engineers Laser. My name is Ed and this is part 4 of our build of the 5-inch gauge 1831 diesel. To start with, I have now cut the replacement horn fabrication kit. If you remember in the last video, I actually managed to lose one of the gussets, so I couldn't finish putting it together because anything that goes on the workshop floor is never going to be seen again. So I've cut another one, and it did also give me a chance to update the drawing file, which I mentioned previously. So you'll notice that there are a couple of little angles on here now, just to save a little bit of filing. Same on these ones up here. They go adjacent to where they are. Those remain unchanged. And then I've also took some metal out of the bottom of here, like I said I was going to. And Holly sensibly suggested that for the cost that's involved, I've actually put an extra gusset in now. So the next time somebody loses one, which could well be me, there is a spare one on there. So hopefully it doesn't bring the whole job to a stop. Okay, there we have it. That's the new one all put together. So you can see that's where I took the metal out. The gussets are all in. Those little angles that I put on it, pretty much it sort of went together. I've opened up the slots that we cut just a tiny little bit. I took about a thou out of each side, and it basically meant they all just slotted together. These bits are still quite tight, so that's good. That's still fairly tight as well, so it's holding everything in place really nicely. What sharp-eyed people may have noticed was there was actually an error on the two gussets that were in the top of the fret here. If you look at them, one of them's angled that way and one of them's angled that way. So I've swapped that round, and we got another new foil, but I'm not going to bother cutting one to prove it, because that is literally just move the angle from this side to that side. But yeah, there we go. So that's got that done now. Moving on, you can see I've drilled all the holes in here ready for the horns to bolt on. Now, I think I said before, I've actually changed the laser cutting file now, so these parts, these holes, sorry, will already be in the laser cut frames for the next person who comes along to build one. So the next job for me now is actually to start getting these all bolted in. They should all be the same, he says. I think that might be a little bit that one's a little bit tight, but anyway, they all need a little bit of fettling just to make sure that they're a nice snug fit. There we go. And then we'll see about getting them bolted up and fitted in place. So there we go, we're starting to get them bolted in now. These are M3 button head screws. They're quite up for the job. There's no issues with those. All the load is taken where the horns fit into the frames. So essentially all they're doing is stopping them falling off. All the load from towing from the couplings and pushing on the buffers and everything, that's all going to go through these edges here. So they're plenty good enough. If you wanted to go the more traditional route, you could actually rivet them in. And in all honesty, I think ordinary copper rivets would be absolutely fine. Be a little bit of an awkward job to do if you've gone with the welded frame, yeah, they're equally doable. But the screws are fine. They're fitted with nylock nuts. You can probably just see on the back there, and they'll be absolutely fine for the job. You can start to see as well why I've had trouble finding motors that will fit, because that is the space that we've got, which is considerably less than you get with something like an 08 or a 9 or a 10, class 37, 47, all of those. They've all got nice big outside frames, outside axle boxes, lots of room to get motors in, whereas with this one, because they're inside, being an ex-steam engine, we have got in the region of 2 5/8 of an inch, and that's all we've got. So the method used on an 08 and all the others won't work. They have the usual way of doing it is you bolt a nice big gear to the back of the wheel. The motor then is axle hung and has the pinion on it, but it all just fits in the 4 11/16 back to back of a 5-inch model. But of course, outside frames lets you do this. Because this has got inside frames, there's no way that's going to work, because for one thing, the wheels are on the outside, so you can't put a gear on the back. What I'd hoped I might be able to do, I was hoping I might be able to find some short motors so that they could perhaps fit in this space here, and then we could do either a gear or a belt drive, but you'd need a really, really short motor to do it. But it's something that I want to try and solve, because I quite like to do a Class 14 teddy bear as well, and they've got the exact same problem. In fact, if you do them exactly to scale, the problem I think is even worse, because the frames on those are even narrower, I believe, although I'm not actually sure whether the horns would be on the outside for a Class 14. If you were going to do this purely as a model for radio control shunting at Gilling, which is part of what I want to do, you could probably get away with motors like these, because this particular one is too big. They nearly fit. If I find a shorter one, perhaps. These are the motors that we use on our blowers. 775s. I'm not sure what the power output on those is. But they're ball bearing supported. They're really nice motors, but I don't know what the power output is. I don't know if it would cope with running on a racetrack passenger hauling at all. And even they're a little bit too big. Don't know. We're still working on it. Anyway, for the minute, I will carry on getting the rest of the horns bolted in. There we have it. That is all 8 of the horns bolted in the frames with the M3x12 button-head screws with the nylock nuts on the inside. I've still got the top ones to do. I'll turn the chassis over and do them from the top. They'll be easier. But that's all of those. And some of them have had to have a little bit of a fettle because the silver solder ran over into the corners a little bit. You need to be careful, you don't put too much on when you do that, so there's just a little bit of fettling going on in there, just to make sure they're all fitted tight up against the inside of the plate. And the key is to not move material from the frame plates here, because they're what locates the horn. So we need to make sure that if you have to fettle them, make sure that you get rid of all the solder out of the corners. It's a little awkward because the bolt face doesn't pass right through. They've got this little ledge on, but you have to be a little bit careful when you do the soldering. The middle sections, they're going to get cut out eventually, because obviously at the minute you can't get the axle boxes in, but they're left in at the minute just to hold everything to make sure they don't spring. So they will come out shortly. Before we do, the next job is going to be to fit the horn stays, and apparently Ed can't count because I have 6 and there are 8. Right, okay, need just more of those. These are going to get clamped onto there, so we're going to do that next. The profile of these is the exact same size as the outside of these, so what we need to do is line them up front and back, and then we're going to put a little toolmaker's clamp in the middle here, and we will spot through the 4 corner holes into the bottom of the horns fabrications. Memory serves, these are cut at the M4 tapping size. I think that's what they are. I will double check the drawing. So we spot through, tap these, and then open out the holes in those. 2 holes in the middle, they're going to go for the spring pins on the axle boxes, and we need to make sure that you can see that the two bolting holes are offset, because otherwise it runs into the end of the flange that runs up the face here. So you need to make sure that those are inboard, so we get them in the right way around. So we'll do that next. I've been down the workshop and picked up two toolmaker's clamps, and we now have the horn keep or horn stay clamped in position on the bottom of the horn keep fabrication. I've just checked the drawing. The holes are 2.6 mil, so they're for M3, not M4. M4 is something else we're working on. And what we're going to do, we're going to spot through these with the 2.6 drill, just enough to create a dimple in this plate, and then we'll take the clamps off, take the plate off, we'll drill through 2.5 mil, which is M3 tapping size, and then the horn keep, we'll open the holes out to probably 3.1, just to give us a little bit of clearance. And that then, well, that'll be that one done then. We need to make sure when we're drilling these holes through that we keep them square as possible to this plate, so we haven't got bolts on angles and things, and then everything will fit together nicely. So I'm going to take this down the workshop and do it in the bench drill and make sure that everything's nice and square. My bench drill is luckily big enough to do that. If you haven't got a bench drill, or it's perhaps not big enough to support the width of this, the other thing you can do is use the adapters, the frames, brackets, whatever they call them, that you can buy for Black & Decker type mains powered drills, so that you can convert them into a drill press. They will do the job just as well, but they'll help keep the drill vertical, because you don't want to be drilling in like that by hand and having bolts all over the place. One way or the other, you need to try and make sure that you keep them vertical. And because we're spotting through from a laser cut plate with all the accuracy that laser cutting gives you, you should then be able to fit the horn keeps to any one, and you haven't got to have to number them and say, right, this is left hand side number 2 or 3 or 4 or 1 or whichever way. They should all then fit anywhere on the chassis. I've been to the workshop and I've spotted the holes through now, all 4 of them. Hopefully, he says. This is where he takes the clamps off and discovers he missed one. And there you go. I think you can just see 1, 2, 3, 4 spotted holes. So the next thing we'll do, I'm going to go back to the workshop. I'm going to put the 2.5 mil drill in, and we'll drill those 4 holes through. While I'm there, I'll also open those out to 3.1 clearance size for the M3 screws. Might as well do that at the same time while I'm down there. I've drilled and tapped those 4 holes M3 now. I think you can just see, you can see the holes. I don't think you can see the thread, but it is there. And I have opened out the holes in the keep now to 3.1 mil. So that should now, these are not the right screws. I've just borrowed these out of the Rolling Road box, the Gauge 1 Rolling Road. But they're M3 cap-heads, so they will do. Let's just have a look. A touch on the long side, so although the inner 2 will be okay. Is it going in? Yes, it is. I think these 2 will bottom out on the button heads which hold it. Yeah, they're a little bit too long, so they've just bottomed out on those bolts, but they've screwed in, so there you go. That's in place now. And yeah, that's that bit finished then. So I've got to go on and do all the others. I've got to get 2 more cut, because I can't count, so we've only got 6 where we need 8. I suspect having the jack shaft threw me off there, but I'm not used to it. But there we go, I'll just get 2 more cut, that's not a problem. I'll double check the listing on the database and the website as well, make sure that says 8 and not 6. I suspect that's where my error was. I'm not going to film carrying on doing all the others because it's rinse and repeat. It's also been quite a long time since the last video, so I think I will, although it's a little bit shorter than the others, I think I will knock it on the head there and get this one edited and published, because 1 or 2 people have said, when's the next video coming out? And with exhibitions and winter maintenance work at the club and just the day-to-day running of MEL, things have been a little bit busy and I've not been able to get into the workshop to make some progress on it. But it's Christmas holidays now, the phone is off, so I've got a chance to get in the workshop and put a few hours in, make some progress on it. Before I do go though, one of our viewers, Graham, has been following us along and picked up on the problems that I was having getting suitable motors, and he made a suggestion and set up a conversation with Andy at Maxitrack to have a look at, see what they produce. Maxitrack have got a great range of stuff. They've got a great website which shows you everything that they do, but having a conversation with Andy, something I didn't realise or perhaps dismissed as a result of lack of experience of dealing with this kind of thing, was that I've been trying to get 150 watt motors in, which I think is pretty standard for the class 8, 9, 10 type of model, you know, the 40s, the 47s, all of those. So when I started making this video, I mentioned these little things, which we use on our blowers, the 775 motors, which are 60 watts. And I dismissed that, thinking, oh no, that'll be far too small for 5-inch. But if you pop along to Maxitrack's website, they have got a kit for a powered chassis. And talking to Andy, those motors are 60 watt. Which took me by surprise, but talking to Andy, he says they're well proven, they've been used countless times, they never give any problems. And the way they work it, I think they start with 2 as your bare minimum, 2 motors, but then I think, if I remember rightly, what Andy said was, for every extra adult that you want to pull, add 1 motor. It's kind of the sort of a rule of thumb that they work to. So if you've got a 4-wheel chassis, you can put 4 motors on it. And I think Andy said that's then rated for 4 adults. But pop along to Maxitrack and have a look at what they've got. They do lots of really good stuff, so Andy knows what he's talking about. So I'm actually going to revisit these little motors. They're not going to fit. I've already shown this. They're not going to fit in there at all. They're too big. So one of the things I had looked at was using a vertically mounted motor, bigger motor, with a bevel drive, but I had concerns about the side loading on that, and talking to Andy, again, who's got a lot more experience than me with this, that is a big problem and best avoided. So, doing a little bit more digging, and I have a plan. He has a plan for mounting the motors. And what we're going to do, we're going to run the motors in pairs per axle. And I think the way it's going to have to go is that we're going to have them mounted above the chassis on the bed plate. Well, above the chassis bed plate. They'll be axle hung. They've got to be axle hung so that they move with the suspension. Are you going to balance there? You're not, are you? No, you're not going to balance. what we're going to do, I think, this still needs drawing up, but I think what we're going to do, we're going to have a pinion on the motor, as you normally would, driving a spur gear on a lay shaft, and then the lay shaft is going to be driven, I'm thinking belt at the moment, to the drive axles. And what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to have 2 motors per axle. Where are we? 1 axle, 2 axle, 3 axle. And I don't see why you couldn't, if you wanted, use one on the jack shaft as well. Now, I know straight away the first comment's probably going to be, oh, but if you put them there, you're going to restrict the height and you're not going to be able to get a battery in. But the problem with 1831, she has a very high frame and a very low roof. Not porta-par kind of low, but still box van kind of standard loading gauge. And you can't actually get your typical car battery on the sole plate and under the roof anyway. So the fact that we've now got motors sitting here is a little bit irrelevant. But we are going to have space here, the full width, because the body's full width, so we haven't even got side footplates to worry about. We've definitely got one there. Depending on whether we fit one on the jack shaft or not, you've got room there as well. So you have got room for 2 batteries in there. And if we go modern technology and use a LiPo or an AGM battery, which are physically smaller, I think we'll still have room to do it. I've got to draw it all up first. But what I'm thinking is we go with the usual metal pinion on the motor, plastic gear on the lay shaft, which is like your fuse. So if anything jams up, it doesn't bend your con rods or coupling rods or anything. It just takes the teeth off the gear. But then because of the problems of replacing a gear that's on a wheel set, where you have to take a wheel off, change the gear, put the wheel back on, if I put the plastic gear on a lay shaft, it'll be much easier to change it. And then if we go with a belt drive down to the axle itself, that'll be quieter than a chain. And I think cheaper than another set of gears. But I've got to work out the fine details of it yet. But let's see how we get on. I think I'll leave it there for now. Thanks for watching. As always, if you like it, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and it will spread its way around YouTube. Thanks for watching.